Joining us now is Democratic Senator Ruben Gallego of Arizona to talk all about all of it.
All of the things. Senator Gallego, thank you for joining us. We were just chatting here in the commercial break about what all of the headlines we've seen today and the anecdotal stories that we have heard amongst folks we know about Latino voters. And I'm wondering your take, because where we landed is there are many things that galvanize Latino voters to go to the polls, and reminding ourselves that the economy was the top issue for many Latino voters across the board in the last election a year ago today. But you cannot divorce any of this from the images that we're seeing from all over the country, the targeting of Latino and immigrant communities. But we think it's not just one or the other, it's all. What say you?
Really, from my experience both campaigning in Virginia and New Jersey and really doing Latino media throughout the year leading up to both races, and just, really having conversations with a lot of my working class Latino family and friends, what I saw and heard was the prices were some of the biggest drivers, but the insults that was happening, the racial profiling that they were feeling, the fear that U.S. citizens were feeling for their family members was going to be a big driver too. And what do I mean by that? These are people that are middle class, working class Latinos that somewhat agreed actually with the president that the border in 2024 was not secure, and they did not like what they saw. And what they heard was that the president was going to bring more security and was going to deport criminals. What they did not want is what they see right now. The roundups that are happening in workplaces, where you're deporting people that have roots in the community, that have no criminal history, that are mothers and fathers of U.S. citizens. If you watch your Telemundo Univision, or just see what Latinos are sharing on WhatsApp, on Facebook, on all types of media channels, you're hearing about these families, these parents of U.S. soldiers, of veterans that are being deported, even though they have no criminal history. If you don't think that's going to have an effect with these voters, you're wrong. And this is the first opportunity they had a real chance to actually choose to send a message to this president, and they chose it. And they chose it overwhelmingly. So it does matter. Costs does matter a lot. Latinos, unfortunately, have to figure out their wealth by how many hours they work, and they don't feel very wealthy right now. But number two, they feel attacked. They feel the community is being attacked. They see U.S. citizens, U.S. Latino citizens being detained for days, being held, and families being separated, and now they're going to give a message that it's not going to be tolerated anymore. And guess what? What you saw in New Jersey and Virginia is not the floor. It can actually get worse for Republicans, and they better figure this out, or actually I hope they don't figure it out, but if they don't figure out, you're going to see these numbers keep moving further and further into the Democratic column.
Senator, I spent the day in Passaic. I know that you have campaigned there, so you know what the vibes were like. All of your analysis comports with what I heard from Latino voters. Everybody talked about affordability. Everybody talked about how the American dream feels slightly out of reach for them. And then they talk about immigration. They talk about, exactly as you said, the fact that the promise was going after violent criminals. All of a sudden, they're seeing moms and dads yanked off the streets. It would seem to me that there is an opportunity here for Democrats to go on offense on immigration. I know you have tried to pivot the party in that direction with your framework. You can do both. You can have a secure U.S.-Mexico border and also not focus on folks in the interior. But I wonder, for you watching the results last night, if you felt that perhaps that aperture had opened a little bit, at least as it relates to members of your own party.
Members of my own party, and hopefully also members of the Republican Party, because I want to find a solution that stops this chaos that's happening on our streets. We've basically traded chaos on the border for chaos in our neighborhoods, which is extremely unnecessary. And I hope that there's a lot of messages that come, towards the Republican Party, but also to the Democratic Party about this. I want the Democrats to understand what this means. What Latinos are trying to say is they want security.
Absolutely the case. That's what happened. The fact is the president got elected in the main because people were very unhappy with the economy, and it hasn't changed for the better. I heard Congressman Lawler say we're moving in the right direction. There's just a poll, I guess yesterday morning, the Economist poll, and 21% of the people agreed with him, and 54% said we're moving in the wrong direction. So there's a reason people are feeling that. They know what happens at the cash register. They know when they try and pay their bills at the end of the month. And they haven't seen improvement, and they don't believe the president's focus has been there. They see him on ballrooms, and they see him on journeys overseas, and they see him talk about the Nobel Prize, and they see him, talking about redoing the bathroom at in the Lincoln bedroom in gold. And they're saying, well, what does this have to do with my life? And the more that they insist that things are getting better and that people and that they have had great economic accomplishments, the more they sound a little like Joe Biden did when he was running for president and got into real trouble doing that. You can't jawbone people into feeling what they're not experiencing.
Yeah, I think that's a good point in terms of, what the numbers actually show in that conversation. Scott, I have to ask you about something that we saw. President Trump had that breakfast with Senate Republicans today, and then he was leaving to go to Miami. That was where he gave fuller remarks on just his presidency 1 year in since he won the election on those issues that Marjorie Taylor Greene was talking about. And David mentioned the ballroom at the White House. They're also making other changes that we noticed today. We were looking inside at the Oval Office waiting for Trump to come out. They have now put up a new gold sign outside of the Oval Office, designating it as, yes, the Oval Office. Scott, I wonder what you make of that.
Well, I'll always be able to find it now when I'm there, and that way I won't be lost if I ever find myself wandering around the Rose Garden area there. Look, I think all presidents put their aesthetic touches on the White House, and then when somebody else comes in, they do the same thing. So if the next person likes it, they can keep it, and if the next person doesn't, they can take it down. And I don't really begrudge Donald Trump or Joe Biden or Barack Obama or George W. Bush or anybody else for putting their aesthetic touches. They did win the office after all, and it's where they live for the time being.
David, what do you make of that sign?
Well,
you're laughing.
Yeah, look, I'm less concerned about what they put on the outside of the office than what goes on inside of the office, and I think that's where most Americans are. What you saw yesterday in really, really significant numbers all over the country were people voting because they were really worried about the direction of the country and the direction of the economy. They want Donald Trump to deliver on the thing that he promised, that he was going to turn things around quickly, that he was going to make American families more prosperous. So far, the family that he's made most prosperous is his own.
Neither could I.
But I think the fact that the lived experience of the economy, I think Obama's closing message over the weekend in New Jersey and Virginia was so salient, because if he says, is your life better today than it was 9 months ago? Ask yourself this question. And his whole riff was about the gilded Oval Office and the wrecking ball. But the fundamental question in politics may not be a new one. Are you better off than you were 9 months ago? And based on people's feelings about the economy, the resounding answer is no.
Well, right. And I think, it is the perennial question in politics, right? But it's also amplified by 10, 20, 30 times by how central that message was to Trump's 2024 campaign. You worked on a campaign in 2004 where that was not the central issue. And so after George W. Bush got reelected, the questions about are you better off, those were the national security frame, and it kind of took precedence there. But not even more than normally, the economy's except in rare exceptions like that, it's always central. But it was so the thing that Donald Trump beat Democrats over the head with for 2 solid years. And not only are things not better, but he is doing things that are relatively easy to explain, either on a substantive or a symbolic level, that are at odds with that. Whereas, like, whether it's the things that Obama was pointing to, which are things where, this guy, your grocery prices are just as high as they always were, while he tears down the East Wing to build himself this Putin-esque ballroom, or the substantive questions around tariffs and how tariffs are actually doing what they're doing to prices. When you decide to make the main thing, and then you not only don't solve the main thing, but you make the main thing worse, and you do it in an egregious, flagrant, almost kind of throwing it in your face way, the way Trump has, it's going to leave a mark.
I think it all comes back to the ballroom. and how the ballroom doomed Donald. And after this midterm, I think the ballroom project's in real danger, especially in terms of what Trump's ultimate vision for it was, which was not only, I'm going to get a ballroom, but this ballroom is going to make me the greatest president in American history. And that sounds absurd. You're like, Christo, does Trump really believe that? And I say to you, we're talking about Donald Trump. Of course he friggin' believes that, right? Of course Donald believes that. So remember, he said, I'm going to do this ballroom. It's going to be great. It's going to be glorious. But the ballroom would be out of touch at any point, but certainly at this moment in history. Donald Trump won a lot of votes from a lot of regular working class people. We can say they were wrong. They largely were, but he won their votes. A lot of people, more people of color, more working class, say, black men, Hispanic men, than Republicans typically win. Those groups still voted Democratic largely, but they were much more likely to vote for Trump this time than in previous elections. And those people who were like, Trump's a regular dude. We know that's BS. But it's like, oh, Trump's a regular dude. He gets regular dudes like me. And now all of a sudden he's building a fancy ass ballroom? A fancy prancy ballroom where people will dance and prance? Do you think the average blue collar guy is going to give a damn about that? When you look at why the backlash happened right now so brutally, whether it was people voting for centrists like Cheryl, or voting for, in New Jersey and in Virginia, or whether it was voting for leftists like Mamdani, the common thread was Donald doesn't get me. Donald doesn't understand my struggle, or he doesn't give a damn about my struggle. I thought he did in November. This November, I'm making a change, and the ballroom is the epitome of Donnie Antoinette. This is a man that wants to dance and prance while you starve.